Welcome to People in Profit. I'm Kate Moody. My guest today is Axel von Trotsenburg, Senior Managing Director at the World Bank. Thank you for joining us today. This week, the World Bank and International Monetary Fund are holding their annual spring meetings. What's on the agenda? What's the number one issue for the World Bank?
For the World Bank, it's going to be an important week. We have, over the last half year, worked hard with our board and shareholders about the reform process that is going to take place in the World Bank. The World Bank has been hugely busy over the last 3 years to support countries in crisis, and we have been actually scaling up our support massively to about a $210 billion program over 3 years. That's $80 billion up from 3 years before. The reason that we have been able to deliver has also triggered the discussion: can we do more? Can we do things better? And that's part of the reform process. So we will discuss that further with our governors when they meet this week.
Now, this is a time of big change at the World Bank. The president, David Malpass, is stepping down. Ajay Banga has been nominated to replace him. Can you tell us anything about his vision for the World Bank?
Well, I cannot say too much because I haven't had the chance to meet him. That will take place once he has been elected. Clearly, with a new president, there is also a new beginning. I think I'm following also the press and his statements. Clearly, he is highly motivated to support developing countries, but also to reach out to all sorts of partners, not only the public sector partners, but particularly private sector partners. So I think what is clear is that he also sees a huge role of the bank to charge ahead, be supportive not only on the countries, but global themes like climate.
You mentioned that there are some pretty big reforms on deck for the World Bank. Can you tell us a bit about some of the focus of these pending changes?
Well, I think fundamentally it is our mission is poverty reduction and boosting shared prosperity. This remains our core business, and I think there the membership is very clear. At the same time, what the last couple of years have shown is that global crises are impacting poverty and the development process. Take, for example, COVID, that has set us back in terms of poverty reduction, but also climate change is impacting the entire world and also the development process. Look at the desertification in the Sahel zone, for example, or these terrible floods in Pakistan. So what we are seeing, global events are increasingly also affecting the development process. So we will need to deal with both. And that has been at the core of the discussions, how we can continue our core mandate, but also be mindful of all these global challenges and bring them better in an integrative way into our operations. So I'm here talking particular about challenges like climate change, but also the health challenges as COVID has shown us, as well as fragility that we are seeing in so many poor countries. So that is where we are looking at it. Now, clearly, that is the strategic directions. Then it will also need to be accompanied with additional resources. And here we have also had quite a bit of discussions. And as a first stage, we are coming with a package of about $50 billion of extra financing capabilities over the next 10 years.
I'd like to focus specifically on the issue of climate change. Is that something that's becoming more central to the World Bank's mandate?
Well, it has been become a very big issue for the World Bank because it affects the development process. What we have certainly done is we have doubled our climate commitments from about 14 billion in 2019 to 29 billion last year. So it's a huge increase, and clearly it is better integrated also in the development process. This is what we are trying to do also through our analytical work and advisory work with governments, that you cannot separate climate anymore from the development process and vice versa. And so this needs to be better integrated. And I think what is going to be extremely important from our operational point of view that climate change is DNA'd into all our operations.
Now, more than half of the world's low-income countries are at high risk of debt distress or they're already in it. What concrete steps can be taken to alleviate some of those problems?
Well, when countries are facing unsustainable debt situations, there is a need for a debt relief and debt treatment. And the IMF and the World Bank undertake so-called debt sustainability analysis, where it's clearly then shown whether a country is in debt distress or not. And then additional action is needed from all the creditors. And this is right now at the heart of the challenge for some of the countries that are in an unsustainable debt situation, that they need fast and deep debt relief. I'm thinking of countries like Zambia, for example.
Is the World Bank itself prepared to take losses on its own loans in some cases?
Well, as you know, 25 years ago, we launched the so-called heavily indebted country initiative. I actually led that, and that involved debt relief. We wrote up off a lot of debt, but subsequently, we integrated actually a debt relief mechanism automatically in our operations. That means when a country is in some sort of debt distress, we automatically ease the conditions through which they can get our money. And that means that in the poor countries, they normally get highly concessional credits, meaning you get for long-term duration and zero interest. And we have made that even more concessional, including grants. So in many of the countries that are in debt distress no longer get from the World Bank credits, but they get pure grants. And that is one way of responding to this problem.
When we talk about debt restructuring, China is increasingly identified as a sort of sticking point. It's the biggest bilateral creditor in the world. David Malpass of the World Bank has recently called for more transparency when it comes to Chinese loans. What role do you see for China? What role should it be playing in this process?
Well, in the whole process, I think we need to involve all creditors because it is collective action. And as you said, for example, transparency doesn't apply only to China, it applies to all creditors. So the bank has been for decades a big champion of that any creditor should be very transparent on the terms and conditions they are providing financing to developing countries. In the case of the World Bank, we publish immediately when a loan is approved, everything on the website, so that people know how much and what are the conditions. And we think this is a good practice, and that should be actually copied by all creditors. So this is one part of this. What we need, of course, in this is that and not only China, but also commercial creditors or Eurobond holders participate and that has been a challenging process, and particularly for the countries that need desperate debt relief. And what we are trying to do is participate through the G20 in the so-called common framework negotiations to see how we can find a solution. But we are also complementing that through a roundtable a discussion where we have invited all creditor groups to participate so that we enhance our understanding, but ultimately also facilitate the debt restructuring.
I want to ask you about that common framework for debt restructuring, which was agreed by the G20 back in 2020. So far, only one of 4 countries that have applied to it have actually secured a deal. That's Chad. Is this system really fit for purpose, or are there too many limitations on it?
Well, I think that this was a major step forward because it was a realization that we needed to have all creditors, even creditors that were previously not part of a debt restructuring, like when I was dealing with the HIPC initiative. I think this is a process, it's a difficult process, and but it is the necessary process to bring all groups together. And there is, I think, no alternative to continue working with all the creditors group, try to understand what their issues are, but then also make the case for the poor countries. The World Bank, at the end of the day, we want that these countries have a reset in their debt situation so that they can refocus on poverty measures, provide more funding for education and health. I think at the end of the day, that is where the bank always is, that we are trying to actually also lend voice to those developing countries that sometimes have a hard time being heard by the creditors.
I want to finish by asking you about the engagement of rich and developed countries in development issues, in climate change issues, in these emerging economies. How do you persuade them to do more, especially when they're dealing with their own internal challenges like high inflation?
Well, I think that we need to keep in mind that we are one world, and the COVID crisis has shown that you cannot no longer insulate yourself from events that are global. And that is with climate change. I think that to believe that one can insulate oneself is not on. And therefore, one will need to see that there is a need for global solidarity, there's a need for global engagement, and certainly the bank is making the case that we need to stay engaged with developing countries. More than ever, problems that are getting worse in certain parts of the developing world will have spillover effects, and that is also not good for richer countries. So therefore, we believe engagement with developing countries is good investment, and it is also necessary because the problems are increasingly global.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Axel von Trotsenburg, thank you so much for joining us on People and Profit today. And thank you for watching. Don't forget you can get in touch with your comments and questions on social media. And stay tuned to France 24.